He covers legal news in Washington as the D.C. Business of Law reporter at the National Law Journal, American lawyer, and ALM Media. He previously worked as the Washington Examiner Supreme Court reporter, and he's covered national political news as a Robert Novak Journalism Fellow at the Fund for American Studies, as a William F. Buckley Jr. Fellow in Political Journalism at the National Review. Folks, his name is Ryan Lovelace. He joins us now. Ryan, how are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You're the author of this book, Search and Destroy, Inside the Campaign Against Brett Kavanaugh. Sir, what made you want to write this?
Well, I really thought there were some unanswered questions coming out of the hearings of Justice Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court just about a year ago. And I knew that I knew some things that other people didn't know, and I wanted to share that. Really going into it, I expected the typical advice and consent process that had undergone previous nominations, whether it was, one from President Obama, like Merrick Garland, that didn't get nominated, that didn't ultimately get confirmed, or one like Justice Gorsuch, President Trump's nominee, who did. What I found with this was there really was a search and destroy process underway when it came to Justice Kavanaugh, and it was orchestrated from the beginning, even before he was actually picked.
Now, okay, if it was orchestrated from the beginning before he's picked, that's probably because, the president did put out a list during the campaign saying, hey, I'm going to select from this list. And, that kind of gives people a little head start into trying to, do opposition research now, which is now a thing,
It is. And what was sort of really interesting about, how this nomination even differed from the one before with Justice Gorsuch, who was also on President Trump's list, ultimately, was that last time around, it was more of a spur-of-the-moment type thing. But this time, a week before Kavanaugh was even nominated, there was a group on the left called Demand Justice, led by a former Hillary Clinton campaign flack named Brian Fallon, and they announced they were going to spend $5 million. They were outside the Supreme Court hours before Trump announced Kavanaugh's nomination in the White House. They were outside with professionally printed signs, ready to go for whoever the nominee might have been. They actually had printed signs for different judges that could have been selected. And we've really never seen that kind of organizing around the courts before. But Demand Justice made a point of saying they want to build the muscle memory to organize around it. And now we're seeing them getting involved already in the 2020 presidential race and trying to push new reforms and other things to try to change the size and scope of the Supreme Court. And it's pretty remarkable to watch.
It really is. They effectively, what's interesting here, we're talking with Ryan Lovelace. He's the author of Search and Destroy, Inside the Campaign Against Brett Kavanaugh. We're an Arkansas-based news show, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg was in Little Rock last night. She spoke at the Verizon Arena. A lot of people were there. And I think it's so interesting. We were going over Ruth Bader Ginsburg's, some of her papers that she wrote back in 1977 on equality and striving for equality, specifically when it comes to men versus women and gender equality. And I think, you pursue it so far that it leads to the kind of the culmination with the Brett Kavanaugh situation, where now all of a sudden, because it's a woman making an accusation against a man, he has got to be assumed guilty, and it's up to him to prove his innocence. I mean, I think it's very interesting, when you look at it that way.
It is, and I think your audience remembers, too, during the campaign, President Trump's campaign in 2016, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice Ginsburg, had come out and talked about, the politics of his campaign, that she wasn't a fan. And she has since talked about, if there were different makeup of justices on the court, how different opinions would come out. And I think what we've really seen outside of the court is a politicization of it. So anytime that you have justices that kind of contribute to the conversation around the politics of things, it can only exacerbate things and make things more heated and more vitriolic. And I think one of the things we're going to see, is that continues. With Christine Blasey Ford, Justice Kavanaugh's accuser, at the time she was saying it was all about her civic duty. It wasn't about politics. It was her civic duty. It wasn't about going to the press. But afterward now, her attorney has admitted, at a conference at the University of Baltimore, that actually Christine Blasey Ford's motivation, her client's motivation, was about Roe v. Wade and the right to have an abortion. And that's really something where we're seeing politics have a determinative effect on how all of this business of judging gets done.
Gosh, yeah, you're exactly right. So this was not your typical advise and consent process. So when did you know something was not right or not normal?
Well, I really think the first time that I picked up on things heating up was in the weeks leading up to Justice Kavanaugh's nomination. We began to see different groups start to organize. And then when there were the first set of hearings on Justice Kavanaugh's nomination before Christine Blasey Ford came forward, there was a PR firm working with these protesters that were supposedly spontaneously showing up at the hearings. And every time one would get hauled out and arrested, they would contact me as a reporter in the press and say, would you like to speak to this celebrity who was just arrested? The arrest count is now this large, and increasingly trying to show there's chaos and people don't like this. And I began to see how it was orchestrated and manufactured that way. And then by the time we got to Christine Blasey Ford's nomination, I started looking into, who her attorneys were. And they were out there the first day we heard that there was something out there on September 12th of 2018. They were saying, they went, Deborah Katz, Christine Blasey Ford's attorney, testified before the House that, unless you rape 80 people, the Weinstein effect has taken hold and no one cares anymore. The press just doesn't care. And that's what really piqued my interest.
So, talk about that. You're a reporter, you're getting these requests, interview this person. The media here, the media whipped people. They whipped half the country. You even had people who were lifelong Democrats, that came out and said, this is not what I signed up for. I don't believe Brett Kavanaugh did this. They're treating him terrible. The media was really weaponized here.
It was. And what's really interesting, too, is this is the first time I think we've seen one of these kinds of orchestrated campaigns occur in a new media environment. When Justice Thomas was undergoing the Anita Hill hearing, there was talk radio, but there really wasn't the online new media ecosystem that was really deployed here against Justice Kavanaugh. This was first alleged at a blog on the internet at The Intercept, and then the larger news publications didn't have to actually bother to confirm any of the details of any of the allegations. It was just, how is this random allegation affecting things? And then they give it legitimacy, and then it gets amplified, and Senator Feinstein says, oh, yeah, I've heard that too. And then before long, it trades all the way up the chain to cable news, where folks are arguing back and forth about what this means and what that means. And no one's ever actually bothered to look into the news of this thing, whether or not this is true, whether or not there's evidence for this. And that was one of the things that I really wanted to do in Search and Destroy, was to uncover as much of this as I could. And then, in the back of the book, even, after I tell the story, I publish all of the private emails of Christine Blasey Ford's lawyers to Democrats and to Republicans, so that folks can read it for themselves in full context and figure out, who was lying to you and who was telling the truth.
His name is Ryan Lovelace. The book, Search and Destroy, Inside the Campaign Against Brett Kavanaugh. You see it up there on the screen there, folks. Amazon.com, the page there. You can get it. Now, did you ever think during this process, Ryan, that he was done, he was finished, that they were going to succeed in torpedoing his nomination?
There was a time when I thought, after the allegations had been leveled and the markup had been delayed, the Judiciary Committee undergoes kind of, very technical procedures, and this first allegation came out the day before what's called a markup, where they would then proceed to a vote to advance it to the full Senate. And when Republicans started delaying things, and we saw Senator Flake, senator from Arizona then, who was on the committee, express some concerns, I began to wonder whether others would crumble and waver and all of that sort of a thing. But I really think, in talking to folks on Justice Kavanaugh's team in the Senate, what really happened to kind of turn the tide and kind of return the spine to some of those Republicans was Michael Avenatti stepping forward and representing the woman Julie Swetnick, who had suggested Justice Kavanaugh was a teenage gang rapist at gang rape parties and all these other crazy allegations. And that was something, along with Senator Collins really doing a thorough job of looking into things, that I think kind of turned the tide for him and made sure that they didn't have to go to Plan B.
Senator Collins, that was, certainly historic. She's certainly not known in conservative circles as being there when you need her. But in this case, she certainly was. I'm sure that was pretty unique to see Susan Collins step up and say, I think, I'm going to vote for him. I'm going to confirm this guy.
It was really interesting. And I think it also showed one of the reasons why so many conservatives had expressed concern before his nomination, before Justice Kavanaugh's nomination, because they were wondering, is he necessarily going to be that fifth vote on Roe v. Wade on certain contentious issues that the left says he is? And there was some reservation about it. And one of the things that Susan Collins had said was, he assured me it was going to take more than 5 that were there now to overturn a long-standing precedent like Roe. So it seems to me that her understanding was, she didn't think he was going to rewrite, prior precedent about the law on abortion. And so I think, she was comfortable with it. And I think conservatives are wondering, well, what does that actually mean then about what could happen here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I mean, somebody who's pro-life, that was definitely concerning to me. But then again, you have all kinds of cases that can come, all sorts of different angles that can weaken Roe versus Wade, and that just depends. Now, that brings me to another point, Ryan, and that's speaking of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a name that I think people are already familiar with, Amy Coney Barrett. A lot of people think that if Ruth Bader Ginsburg vacates the court for any reason, Amy Coney Barrett might be, a front runner to replace her. I believe I think maybe during the Kavanaugh proceedings, I remember when they thought his nomination was going to be torpedoed and he was going to withdraw, somebody bought the domain stopamyconeybarrett.com. So, I mean, I think we could expect a repeat of this if there's another vacancy on the court.
I think you can, and I think it'll probably be potentially when it would happen even worse. I know with Amy Coney Barrett, a lot of people remember the committee hearings on her lower judgeship nomination where Senator Feinstein said the dogma lives wildly within you with regards to her Catholic Christian faith. And I think when it comes time, if she is nominated, the attacks are only going to get worse, and they're going to broaden out beyond her faith. One of the interesting things that she's been doing since she's been on a court of appeals has been an opinion that involves gun ownership and the Second Amendment, and her dissent saying that in certain circumstances and under certain rules and things, felons should be able to have firearms per her originalist reading of the Second Amendment. And that's something that I fully expect. It's not going to just be about her faith, as some folks might expect with Roe v. Wade and abortion and her pro-life, the supposed proclivities being an issue. I think there could also be an issue about the Second Amendment and guns with nomination from her. And I think she recognizes that. As I've heard her speak in D.C. in private at a few events here, and it's one of the things that comes up, and it's very interesting to watch because it seems to me that she gets just how bruising and political this could all become very quickly.
Wow. Ryan Lovelace, appreciate you writing this book. Again, Search and Destroy. Encourage you guys to go out there and get it. And Ryan, best of luck to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.